Hi, this is Mark News from Plant Talk Radio. Thanks for subscribing and listening to our podcast, Your Gardening Questions from Plant Talk Radio. If you have a gardening question you'd like our host Fred Howard to answer, send him an email. The email address is fred@planttalkradio.com. Now for today's question. Last week you touched on digging and dividing hostas this time of year, and
yes.
we had a few people ask if you would tell us a little bit more about digging and dividing those because, you know, it's such a popular plant and such a popular thing to do when they start really getting prolific. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Let's just say that right now in my yard, hosta buds are up anywhere from just breaking through the crust to maybe an inch tall. This is an ideal time to dig and divide. Now, you can wait and do it later, too, but let's just start with a clump that's been in the ground for 3 or 4 years. Usually at that point, the stems will be coming from a fringe around the size of the pot that you originally planted them from, because as they grow, the center will tend to age out, die, whatever, and then all of the leaves, buds come up around the outside. Now, you have several options. To be safe, and if you don't really want to get into a whole lot of work, you can dig 1/4 of the plant, 1/2 of the plant. In other words, take a sharp spade, kind of look down between the buds, and make a deep plunge into the soil right there and go across the plant. You can leave half of it sit untouched. It will still have been disturbed a little bit, but you could dig the other half. The other half then can be split up, and I'm assuming this 4 to 5 year old plant now will have numerous buds. You could take a hose, wash off all the soil so you can see them, and get down to the individual eyes or buds, and hopefully with a little bit of root on the bottom, that you could take a knife and maybe make 15 or more plants out of that clump. Or you could simply set it up on the ground, cut it into 2 or 3 pieces, have then multiplied your plants, put them again in other places, fertilize the one that you left sit, because you did get into the roots a little bit. There's no question about it. So that one, you don't worry about having lost. Now, on the ones you divided and took away, let's just say that planted right about now and or soon, or even before this point, you can just simply water them. Now, this week you wouldn't have had to water at all. As a matter of fact, I did some digging last Saturday, I'm certain, and actually Mother Nature took care of all the water they needed. Now, plant those plants with the idea of what the depth of the soil was before you took them out of the ground. So if the buds were an inch high at that point when you dug them, then plant them so that there's still an inch high sticking out with the with ground level. Now, you don't have to be as careful with hosta as you do with peonies. Hosta will go ahead and do their adjustments in a much more rugged manner than a peony, because peonies in the ground too deep, and they just won't flower. They'll grow. They'll look nice in terms of foliage. So back to the hosta. Planting them, I would do it as soon as you can, even to the extent where they're not delicate as some plants are. I would still have the soil prepared, maybe the holes dug, where you're going to put them, so you can get them, the clumps divided and put right back in the ground. I would indeed enrich the soil. They love some organic matter. They can, of course, grow in what I call junk clay, but it's always good when you are planting new to put in some organic matter, either perhaps from your own compost pile or many bags full of good soil available to us as gardeners from the garden centers. So it's a matter of getting it done. Now, I was at a meeting some years ago, and a discussion led toward an argument and got to how do you get more divisions. And the one guy said, "Now look, I'm tired of this conversation. Let me show you how." And we walked over to a hosta that was probably 12 inches across the root and bud area. He stepped into the middle of it, spun around 360, ground off all the tops. and some of the uninitiated actually gasped.
Oh, yeah.
And I could see why. Well, anyhow, what he was doing was indeed trimming too hard, if you want to look at it that way. He was destroying what Mother Nature set up to be the first buds this year. However, in doing so, where he did put the plant into a kind of a desperate situation temporarily, it caused new buds to form in the crown of the plant. And I suppose where he crushed maybe, let's just say 10 stems, he probably got 30 to come back. Now, they'd have been little pips. They would have been, I'll call them starts. It wouldn't have been a plant that grew much that summer into the flowering stage and so on. But you could brutalize them and do that. And then the next thing, one of my favorite stories, it takes a while to tell the fully, but we met a man who had been at a Hosta show. Now, these are people that are down to the infinite degree on things. I thought he was handing me this quart pot with a little bitty hosta that had 3 leaves, 3 only. As he held it out, I reached for it, and he snapped that back, something fierce. You aren't going to touch it. I thought you were handing it to me. No. Now, that was the beginning of the days of tissue culture, where he knew, and I did too, if I had just taken my thumbnail and run it down the main stem of one of those leaf blades, I would have gotten X number of cells under my thumbnail that I could then take to the laboratory. With delicate procedures, I could take the individual cells, put them in a nutrient solution, and I would have 40, 50, 60 new plants. Now, this was a plant that he had through a friend who developed this plant, or let's just say bred for it. The breeder kept the main body of the plant. He then divided off 2 small pieces, shall we say, sold one to each of his 2 friends so that they could move on into the propagation of this. Each of those cuttings was $750.
See, I just try to stick things in the dirt and get them to grow. So,
well, these were specialties.
Those are some expensive hostas, let me tell you.
Yes, but then, the grower, it knows that people can do the same thing all the way across the world. So he makes, let's just say, $50 per plant the first year. He makes only $40 the second year. Third year, people are making their own cuttings. And the fourth year, it's back to a $12 plant again. So...
Hey, thanks again for listening to our podcast. Be sure to subscribe to our other podcasts as well, the Plant of the Week podcast and the Plant Talk Radio podcast, all on iTunes or your favorite podcast player. If you'd like to sponsor a daily podcast, contact us at fred@planttalkradio.com. To find out more about Fred Hauer and Plant Talk Radio, visit our website, planttalkradio.com.
Circle270media.com